who service lots and lots of organizations in the wellness world. We're really excited tonight to be presenting a topic that is on front of mind for many, many people. We often see a lot of this in the workplace, and without further ado, getting too much into it, I'm really excited to present Sarah Hilton, and she will be taking us through the magic of managing mental health. Before we go there, though, I'll just show you my screen there now. A couple of things. You'll see on your panel on your computer, there's a question box. We ask that you continue to ask the questions you have about the topic. Anything that's relatable, I will interrupt Sarah and she will answer on the fly. If she is going to be addressing that question later on in the presentation, she'll likely mention that. There's also an icon there on your panel that's a raise your hand button. If you would prefer to be unmuted and ask the question yourself, by all means do that. Let us know, and I'm happy to give you the floor, so to speak, to ask your question. We're really interested in hearing from you. Keep it as interactive as possible, and I'm simply your host. I will be marshaling the questions that come in, and very excited that we have so many of you on the call this evening. Really, really excited to be promoting health and mental health within our families. So without further ado, Sarah Hilton, are you there? You can hear me okay?
I can hear you. Good
Perfect.
evening.
There we go. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you, Megan. I'm going to start tonight by dispelling making a couple of confessions, two confessions actually. One is people think that when you run a webinar, you're an expert in the field. Well, I firmly believe that no one really is an expert on your mental health or your child's mental health. I think you need to be your own experts in a way. And so my role tonight is more about bringing some ideas, some new thoughts, some tools that you can use to see if then they help you, your family, your children, your parents, so that you can be the expert in managing your own mental health. Saying that, I have been working in the field for over 30 years and running as Stressed Out Solutions for the last 10. And one of the things that is really key and important for us in talking about mental health this evening is that we really want to promote that talking about mental health is just like talking about physical health or caring for yourself, self-care. And it doesn't have to be all serious. We can have a little fun with this evening, and I hope we do, in some storytelling and sharing. But also we want to make sure that you walk away at the end of the hour saying, wow, that's new information. I'm going to take that away with me and do something with it. Share that story with somebody else. Talk to somebody about it. So that's kind of the one confession. The second confession is that there really is no magic of managing mental health. Mental health is as simple or complex as you allow it to be. And what I mean by that is you could say to yourself, well, I'm going to look at this as a complex issue, and I'm going to take pieces of it and I'm going to try to figure it out. Or I could look at it as I take one step at a time, and as I do, I'm going to find the simplicity in this to help me and my family understand this better. So, made my two confessions. I'm excited about this evening. Please, as Megan said, your questions, somebody else could be sitting there silent right now and afraid to ask a question. So please ask a question knowing that you're helping other people on the call as well. So let's take it away. June 3rd, 1995. If you had been with me, you would have seen that this was my wedding day. And on my wedding day, like many of you in your weddings, you sit at the head table and you look out to all of your family and your friends, the closest people in your life. Now for me on this particular day and at this particular moment that I'm recalling, my dad stood up to give the father of the bride speech. Now, before I go any further, what I'd like you to do, as you're sitting there at home or in your office or wherever you are, is think of a time where you had all of your closest friends and family, and they were all gathered in one spot, in one location. So it could have been a graduation or a wedding or a family reunion, but one of those times where you're all gathered together. And then in your situation, think of this. My father stood up and he said, well, he gave a very long speech, but we won't go there because we only have an hour. But what he said was, look around to your left and to your right. Look at all the people in the room right now. And then think, never again will the same unique group of people be in the same room together. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build new friendships, to build new relationships, to get to know people, and enjoy and celebrate the moment. Well, I thought that was a great speech, and he's absolutely right. If I look back at my wedding pictures, which were many years later now, there is a lot of change that has happened. I've had people in my life pass away. I've had friends that moved on that I don't have connection with anymore. Life changes. Relationships change. But then, being in the mental health field, the other thing I noticed is when I looked out at the room, I recognized just how much mental health has affected my life and the people around me. You see, if you had looked back into the back corner, what I call the rowdy corner, I don't know if you had one of those tables, but we definitely did. And my good friend Terrence sat at this rowdy table in the corner for a reason. He indulged in a few too many drinks. But what I knew about Terrence was it wasn't just a one-time thing at celebrations. He indulged pretty much every night. He was an alcoholic. And then I looked out and I saw my Aunt Marion, who I didn't know very well. She lived in England. She came in for the wedding. And she came, and at my wedding she wore little white gloves. And at first I thought it was a British thing, a custom, and it still could be. But what I learned later was that she had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And she wore gloves so that she wouldn't have to touch people's hands when she was shaking or getting to know them, shaking hands or getting to know them. Then I looked out and I saw my other friend, Sally. Now, Sally, she had just been through a divorce. So this was actually her very first time coming to an event as a single person again. It was very difficult, and of course a wedding made it even a little bit more difficult. And then there was also my nephew at the wedding. And what I didn't know is in the future that nephew would have many, many challenges with mental health. So in saying all of this, I ask you to think about your group of people, those people in your life that were at your special event, and think about who you're listening to this webinar for today. Is it your friend? Is it a family member? Is it for yourself? Because the reality is we're not going to cover everything about everybody. But maybe you could take home one small idea or thought or tool that can help that one or two people in your world. So I'll leave that with you. Who are you concerned about, and how, by speaking out today, by talking about mental health, by sharing stories, who could you help that might be sitting there in silence? All right, so we're going to break down some of the myths. If you could go to the first slide there, Megan. The first thing to keep in mind, mental health does not discriminate. There's nothing left to say about this slide except to remember that mental health affects everyone. Our children, our parents, our neighbors, our friends. 1 in 3 Canadians are affected and will be affected by mental health. We see this because our emergency departments at hospitals are crowded with mental health stories. We have jails that are crowded with mental health stories, and we even have mental health represented in our homeless population. But what people sometimes forget is, yes, we even see mental health in our home, at school, work, and even at the kids' hockey games. The good news is that it also means we are talking about it. We are seeking support, and that will help with continued conversations so that we can be preventative and start promoting mental health and wellness as a positive thing. We see this in how many new services and supports are popping up. Now, this is just one. I don't know anything about this agency. It's Daughter for a Day. I don't even know where it comes from or what area it comes from. But the reason I'm putting some of these up is just to show you there's thousands of resources out there these days. There's things you can read about, you can do online, like activities you can do online. There's conversations, there's chat groups. There's every type of resource out there that you can imagine. part of the problem and challenges that we have today is we're not sure where to start. How do you start knowing what resources to call or to connect with? And maybe it's that you don't know how to navigate the mental health system. Often if you do reach out to a doctor or a hospital or perhaps a counselor that you know, there's a very narrow path that they lead you on, and perhaps you haven't had the opportunity to explore all the different venues and avenues that you could go to. And then thirdly, what should you look for when you're looking for supports? We're going to try to answer some of these questions today. Next slide. The first question to ask yourself is, what is my reason for seeking help? And this is a really important question. And again, this is just a slide that's up there with some mental health services for children. But really it's, why am I seeking help? Or why am I seeking help from my mother, or my child, or my friend? And I'll give you some of the reasons that we get calls for. We do a service in the workplace called Resource Consultant Calls. And here are some types of reasons people call. So one of the reasons that I've heard more recently is, I had support as a child for anxiety and depression. And I've now moved to a new job, a new city, and I'm really excited, but I also know that this will bring new stressors to me. And so I want to be prepared for when the stress runs high. This kind of building resources is for preventative reasons. I always think, you know, why wait for the crisis to happen? When you take care of your health, you go out to the gym perhaps, you go for walks, you eat healthy, you do all of these things to take care of your health to prevent heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure. You do it to prevent. So in mental health, we have to look at it the same way. You want to do things in your world to help you prevent getting into a crisis situation. And knowing your resources is a good first step. I also have had calls where somebody called and said that she went to my training and she sat there, and some of the things that I said touched base or triggered some things for her. And she didn't think that she needed help at that particular time, but what she really realized was when I talked about some of the ideas and thoughts in the mental health training, she piped up to say, well, maybe she wasn't as great as she thought she was. Maybe she was having some struggles. So she needed immediate support, but she wasn't in a crisis situation. It was just that the symptoms were increasing or intensifying, and therefore she wanted to reach out to get support. And the third person, third kind of scenario that calls often is where, and I had this situation not long ago, where a woman left work, a young woman left work, and she was suicidal. So the night before she had actually attempted suicide. And she still went to work that morning, but on the way home she recognized that she really wasn't well and was worried about her pills at home. So in those types of calls, it is connecting somebody to the crisis services, to the hospital, to get that crisis and immediate help so that their safety comes first. And then, of course, backing that up with some follow-up and support down the road. So why are you seeking help? If you're thinking right now, listening to this call, that it is really for crisis, that I'm going to encourage you to do one of two things. Okay, finish listening to the presentation tonight, but make sure that you tell somebody at home that you're in crisis. Call 911 if you need to, or call your local crisis services. Next one there, Megan. All right, so again, this is just another resource that's out there, and it happens to be in our London area, Mind Your Mind. I firmly support this one as far as, you know, it's a great resource for young people. But besides that, the reason we're just putting up these resources is to show you that there's so much out there. Think about how much time you spend buying a new car. And I know this is a little off topic, but I just want to bridge this for a minute. So you go out and you know you need to buy a new car. So what do? You do some research. You ask others about how they like their cars. You test drive a car. You do more research. You might do a budget. You might write out pros and cons, and then you look to see what fits with your lifestyle. You do all of this to buy a car, and yet so many people forget to do this to build a supportive and healthy lifestyle. So what does this mean for your mental health? First off, do your research. Ask friends and family. Sometimes they'll know things about you that you may not have even recognized, and what supports might be the best. Look online. There are hundreds of supports out there. Be as specific as possible with your particular needs. Write out exactly what you are looking for: counseling, one-to-one, group support, information, intervention. What resources do you have accessible to you now? Reach out to those, your EAP program. So for those that are working, your employee assistance program, your family doctor, perhaps your school, or through a spiritual outlet. And then finally, I need somewhere that meets in the evening after work, or I don't have a car, so I need to meet somewhere where I can take a bus. That's doing your research. And just like shopping for other kinds of things, I encourage you to look at how you're shopping for your own mental health care. Bottom line is, don't give up. Sometimes it will take a couple of attempts to find the right fit for you or your daughter, your child, or your parent. All right. So the magic is in the message. I said I'd touch on magic a little bit, but it's really in the message. Today we're going to cover 5 C's to how you can support your family and themes that are in society today so that we can move forward and build some tools for you in your situation. There are common themes. So let's start with this. Communication is everything. Everything we do revolves around communication. Think of this statement: I never said she failed her test. Now, let me say it a different way. I never said she failed her test. 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 Many different meanings for the same sentence. And when we talk about communication, it's about how we present something, how we share a message. If you go to a family member and say, I think you need help, that's one way to present, but your outcome may not be very helpful or very successful. Or you could say, I'm concerned about you and I want to help. Different message. The feelings of where it's coming from could be the same. You could be frustrated with the situation, but how you present that to somebody that needs help is going to make all the difference in the world. Communication. We're going to look at change. Change is constant. How we see change can play a part in our mental health. How do you handle change? Does it excite you and you're driven and motivated by it? Or does it stress you so that you end up shutting down or not dealing with things? We will look how change plays a role in mental health. How do you check in with friends, kids, and other family members? Checking in is a key element to care and support. And then the next one is, how do you take the chaos and you find your calm? Because as you know, chaos is real. For an example, you're driving along and you have this rear ender. You know, everybody's okay, but there's a little damage to your car. Well, all of a sudden your mind starts playing tricks, right? So it starts with, oh my gosh, I can't afford the repairs. Then it goes into, oh, me and my partner have been fighting about this for ages. This is going to lead to another fight. How am I going to get the kids to the extracurricular activity? Now I'm going to be late for work. You know that work really hates that. I'm going to be fired, and your mind just starts to spin. And it happens to all of us and at different points and different times. And what we're going to talk about tonight is how to reduce that chaos and find a calming place to help you get through some of those triggers in difficult situations. And then finally, we're going to look at how to create a support circle, because it's not just one type of support and it's not just one person that's going to provide support to you all the time. We want to look at who is in that team of support for you. All right, so let's talk about communication. Go ahead. What if we treated every illness the same way we treat mental illness? Now, I know some of you may be reading these and thinking, wow, that doesn't really happen. I'm sad to say that it really does. I'm sure you've heard at times somebody saying, just snap out of it. Get off the couch, stand up, and get out there. What about things like, I think it's high time you snapped out of it. I'm getting tired of this cancer of yours. Can you imagine saying that? No. I do this exercise when I do trainings, and we hold a rope, and on one side of the rope is mental health and one side is mental illness. And when I first do the exercise, I'll say from the workplace, Joe, you're going to represent mental health, and Kathy, you're going to represent mental illness. And when I say that, because everybody's connected to everybody and there's jokes that go through the office and all of this, you'll hear this laughter as I get to, Kathy, you're going to represent mental illness. And then I sit there and I say, okay, so wait a minute, Mental Health 101. If I had said Joe over here is going to represent cancer-free and Kathy's going to represent someone with cancer, would you laugh? No. But yet, because it's mental illness, we all come with different preconceived ideas. And what we want to do is break those myths and start talking about mental illness like every other illness. Next slide. What can you say? So silence creates suffering, we know that, but speaking out creates support. So these are some things that are just generally what you can say. I care for you, you're not alone, are you okay, I'm here for you, let's do this together, you're right, I don't understand, but I want to try. Simple statements that show that you have an open door to talking about support. All right, so here's that rope I talked about. And I'll explain what it does and how it helps people understand mental health to mental illness, because one of the things that we often hear about is what is the difference between stress symptoms, mental health symptoms, and really what mental illness is. So here we go. You picture the rope. Here it is. You've got left screen mental health, right screen mental illness. Well, let's say you were feeling pretty healthy. Things were going really well, you know, you're feeling pretty good about things, great weekend coming up, work was good, things were good. And then all of a sudden you have a death in the family. And then you notice that you have some symptoms of stress or mental health that we call them, such as you're not sleeping, and you're not eating, and you're crying all the time. And you know, you're having fights with the family because you're not sure how to arrange the funeral. And you can see yourself slowly moving along this rope with symptoms of stress or mental health, whatever you want to call this, and it starts to affect you. But then over time, things get better and things calm down and you get back into your routine and you find yourself back in this world of mental health. We'll give another example. Then all of a sudden, you're going along and your mother takes ill and ends up in hospital. Well, all of a sudden you need to make hospital arrangements and you have to take time off work and you're having symptoms and you're worried and you're concerned and you're irritable and you can't focus and you can't concentrate. But then your mother gets well and she comes back home and you've got the right supports and things go back to mental health. So for some people, they have one of these triggers, these stress triggers in life, and they go along and they have these symptoms, but for some people, the symptoms never go away. And at times they increase or they intensify. And they may have a predisposition to mental illness, such as a genetic reason, by a chemical imbalance, psychosocial factors, a physical stemming of a physical nature. So all of these things then lead us to this area called mental illness. The bottom line is we all fit on this continuum somewhere. We fit in here at different points in different parts of our life and times in our life. And it's important for us to pay attention to that. So what are the symptoms? What should we be looking for? There are thousands of symptoms, and the real key here is that everybody is an individual. So how one person is affected by depression could look differently than another person affected by depression. You never know unless you ask that person. So if someone says, well, I'm feeling depressed, my next question would be, what does that look like for you? What does that mean for you? What symptoms do you have so that I can really understand? So here are just some that we pay attention to: eating more or less than usual, sleeping more or less than usual, withdrawing from activity, irritable, crying all the time, lack of energy. So there's lots of different symptoms that you've probably heard of. It doesn't matter if they come from stress, mental health, or illness. What does matter is how long the symptoms are lasting, how intense they are, and if it starts to affect your day-to-day living. Okay, so even though I said that, there are certain things that we want to look for in the different kind of times in our life or stages in our life. Here are some common symptoms which are often we see in regular challenges, but how they show up in kids. So I'll give you a story to share this, to show this example. A child doesn't want to go to school. Say a 10-year-old doesn't want to go to school. You've probably been there if you have children, and you do the parent check. You check for fever, you check, they say they have a stomach ache, but they ate their Fruit Loops for dinner. You see them watching a cartoon, laughing away. You know what? You're okay, and away you go. But maybe what they're saying is, hey, I'm feeling anxious today. We're depressed today. Maybe it's a mental health challenge, and therefore we want to pay attention to that. So what do we look at? We look at, first off, if there's some continued behaviors, continued symptoms that are showing up on a regular basis. And if you are concerned, start with your doctor. Sometimes symptoms can be a result of something physical, like an iron deficiency or allergy. If the doctor believes that it is related to a mental health challenge, start doing that research that we talked about. We will get into a couple of tools for this. First off, start mental health conversations early in life. Make it a part of your dinner conversation, and I'll show you a couple of ways to do that in a minute. Hug a lot. There is a power to touch, and if people feel connected through touch, like your child, and you're holding their hands or you're giving them a hug, they're more able to calm and relax and share what's going on. And I know it sounds like such a simple thing, but when a child is anxious or they're depressed, feeling that support from someone they trust and love is going to help them communicate that. And listen to what others say. Sometimes we don't even see it because, you know what, we see our kids every day, and sometimes it can be annoying and frustrating and tiring. And sometimes we don't see the other things that are going on, and maybe somebody, a close friend or a family member, would point those out to you. Take a clue or pick up on that clue if that's the case. So this is a little different than the teenagers, which we're going to talk about next. So both Kim and John are going from grade 8 to grade 9. Really tough time. It's a time of transition. Kim's symptoms look like this. She tantrums. She doesn't want to go to dance that summer, which she does every summer. She's done for years. She goes to camp, but cried all the time, so they called to have you bring her home. She's going to the basement, working hours on crafts in her craft room. She complains of stomach aches and headaches, shaking, curled in a ball, not wanting to go to school when grade 9 begins. John, same transition, 8 to 9, hiding alcohol, going to parties, into hours and hours of game playing, looking pale, acting out at dinner, not eating, skipping his first few classes of school. The symptoms look completely different, and yet one of the things that we encourage is always to look at, okay, is this a change in that individual? When teenagers are experiencing symptoms, you might want to see you might want to check in on these type of behaviors. Pay attention. I love this one. If you ask your child how they're doing, ask your teenager how they're doing, do you ever get that response, fine? Well, listen to that response. Is it the typical fine? Or is it fine? Or is it fine? Like what is coming from that? What is stemming from that? And if it changes, then you have something to share with them. Hey, what does that mean for you? What's fine mean? And I'm going to give you some tools, as I mentioned, to dig into that a little bit deeper. I'm concerned about you, honey. Are you okay? I'm fine. How do your kids communicate? Why not try the same method to build communication with your teenagers? If they share more in text, you text them. How are you doing today? How about taking a drive with them for ice cream or anywhere they like to go? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes kids, especially teenagers, talk more in a car or a car ride than anywhere else. Or finally, decide that you were concerned enough to sit them down at the kitchen table and share concerns. And then we've got the young adults. And I separated these for two reasons. Onset for illness we often see is between 17 and 24, and there's a real correlation to what's going on in life during those times. Usually when our young adults head off to a school or to a new routine, whether it's work or school, university, college, they might invite you to connect with them via Skype or Facebook or different methods of communicating. One of the things I always say is, have a look. Does what they say to you match what they're writing and posting on Facebook or Instagram? There's a big article actually today about Instagram and how it's the top cause for mental health challenges in youth. And then a couple of tools that you can use. Talk to your young adult before they leave home about mental health. It's okay to take them to a counselor to talk about their fears coming up to going off to university or college. Get them to talk about mental health openly so they know that that's a conversation you're okay having once they're away. Give your young adult a list of resources. So do your research. If they're going off to Queens, let's say, and they're going to be at in Kingston, look at what resources are there and actually walk it through with them. Give some phone calls and see what resources or what services are offered so that if they need them, they're there for them. And then keep the lines of communication open. Keep in touch. One thing you'll find about schools, universities and colleges is that they do have programs, they do have counseling, they do have crisis services. And if your child has ever needed it in their past, so as a child or as a teenager, then make sure they also have those supports in place before they go off to school. They may never need them, but they might, so that you're prepared. Next one. Mental health for seniors. We hear much more about this lately. These are some symptoms that I would say are specialized with the senior and aging population. Think again of the extreme changes that go on for seniors in today's world, and they could be things like health issues, change of home, change in friends as their friends pass away. I want to tell you a little story about my dad. My dad had Parkinson's illness. And so with Parkinson's illness, you often fall or your balance is off. When he went off to a nursing home, my mom lived with us, and one night in the middle of the night she gets this call from the nursing home saying, Alan's fallen, and he's okay, but he's fallen out of his bed. And my mom said, okay, so what do you mean, he's okay? Oh yeah, he's back in bed, and he didn't hurt himself, and he seems to be doing fine. And in her mind, she went, oh, okay, like that's why he's there. I don't know why really you called to wake me up in the middle of the night, but you did. And then another time we went in the morning, Mom and I went in and to have breakfast with my dad, and my dad looked exhausted. And the nurses and PSWs at the nursing home said to us that he had had an anxiety attack in the middle of the night. And he was shaky and he was sweating and he was crying out for my mom. So he's like, Ann. And he was agitated. They gave him a medication to calm him down. And my mom said, like, why didn't you call me? He was calling for me. Why didn't you call me? I could have talked to him over the phone and calmed down his anxiety attack. And they said, oh no, that's not in our protocol. Well, in her mind, you called me because you fell out of bed and I can't do anything. I'm not a nurse. I wouldn't be, it would be difficult for me to get out in the middle of the night to drive to him. But now you're talking about something that I've lived with and I can help and support. So one thing that I always encourage with seniors is be proactive. Ask supports and doctors about mental health support so that you have things in place. Talk about change in life and early in life so that you don't wait for crisis, and engage in outside services before needing long-term care. Help with that transition in that process because mental health for seniors is very, very serious and can be very overwhelming. All right, so what about you? Perhaps you're working in a position of working part-time, full-time, caring for other children, or being a parent, which is high in workload as well. I know from when I was home with my kids when they were younger. So these are the things that we look for at mental health at work. Sometimes work is a place where we see signs and concerns around mental health challenges. How do you, find work? How do you balance work and home? If you find your coworkers or leaders are identifying concerns, pay attention and ask someone close to you for clarification or verification. So if you want to check in and people are making comments about you're looking tired all the time, those kinds of things, check in with someone that you trust and love. And if that's the case, pay attention to that. Now that you see some of these signs about communication and along the lines of symptoms and how they show up in different places, these are 3 little tips that you can kind of put in your toolbox. Support your workplace in bringing mental health to the table. Nobody's going to do this magic alone. It really is about building a community, and a workplace is a great place to build that community of people talking about mental health. Disability claims, as we know, are on a rise. There are some serious issues and concerns around mental health in the workplace with things like absenteeism and lack of concentration, low productivity. All these things are happening, and if we got to know people better and worked alongside with them, they can bring their best to work. Check in with your coworkers. And also another great idea is to support or suggest a peer support at work. All right, so let's get into some fun stuff about the 5 C's. Communication. Lots of ways to do communication plans and the way to communicate. One thing is you could build a support circle with your friends, because there's always other people going through similar situations like yourselves. Or if you're at work, build a mental health committee. So build groups of people so that people are at different stages. Some may have young children that they're just trying to figure out this mental health world. Other people may have been through mental health all through their life with their children. So really build a support circle for yourself. Another way, go seek out opportunities to learn. There's often conferences, workshops, seminars that speak out on mental health. Sign up for mental health notes. So we do newsletters, but there's lots of free newsletters all over the internet these days. And once you find one that really fits with who you are, mom with mental health, or learning to cope with teenagers' mental health, there's all kinds of information. And once you find a connection that really works for you, just start following their newsletters, following what they tweet about, what they do on Facebook, because that's going to give you added support. Look online for group chats on specific topics. So if you're specifically looking at how do I support my brother who has depression, you can type that in and you will see that there is groups and support groups that are available to you, both professionally run as well as support groups with individuals that have just been through experiences with you, which is a whole type of learning in itself. And then I always encourage this, most importantly, is ask lots of questions. So at this time, great place. If you've thought of a question but you haven't written it in yet, this time would be a good time to do that. The more questions you ask, the more answers and solutions and help you can get. So ask your questions, so important to do so. All right, so let's look at the family check-in. Remember when I said earlier in the presentation that there's different ways to check in with your family members. These are 2 ways that you're going to see tonight that are what we call the most successful Let's Stressed Out solutions. One is a family check-in used by numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that a child, instead of saying fine, can say on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? 1 being you'd rather be anywhere but here, so things are not good. 10 being everything is fantastic. Where do you fit? And when somebody, a child or a family member or your spouse answers a number, it gives us a clear understanding of what's going on for them and how we perhaps communicate with them. So I'll give you an example. Actually, I just had another example today from one of our calls earlier, is when a child says to you, oh, my number is a 3 today, and this works for my daughter. My daughter's off at out in Banff, and I'll write to her and I'll say, how you doing today, Jessie? And she'll write back and she might say a 3. And it doesn't mean I have to get into everything with her, but you know for a fact that I'm going to check in with her again. I'm going to see where that is. So I might say something like, oh, honey, I hope your day goes a little better. Hey, I'm around all afternoon, would love to chat. And I book that check-in with her because she was a 3. On other days, if she writes back and she says she's a 10, you better believe I probably won't hear from her because she's off doing some pretty incredible things. It's a check-in process that's simple, easy. Kids can text you their number. And that is a lot more information than the silence that you're perhaps getting now. Our whole family does it. So it means that you really have to get engaged and make it fun. And this woman that I was speaking to today, she says, love the number system. We all use it. And my son is all over it. Some days he comes home as a 4 and he wants to chat, and other days he's an 8 and he's all excited to go out and do something. And so it gives a really good understanding of how kids are doing. What does that mean for a workplace, let's say? If your coworker says they're at about a 3, that may not be a good day to throw another project or another deadline on them. It may be a good time to say, hey, I'm going out for coffee, can I bring you one? Or I'm going for a walk at lunch, would you like to join me? If somebody says, a coworker says they're an 8 or a 9, it's probably a good indication that if you needed help with something, that would be a good person to go to and ask for some help. So numbers can do a lot to help check in with people. Another favorite of ours, and if you can go to the next slide, is a feeling cards. So these are all individual cards. We actually sell SOS feeling decks that have both the numbers and the feeling cards on them. What we're trying to get here is to really understand how people are feeling, how they're doing, so that you know when you go into the workplace or anywhere and you go, how are you doing? Oh, fine, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm good. What does that really mean? How can you support somebody? Whereas if somebody gives you a feeling, it gives you some indication of where they're at. An example of this is a friend of mine, she took these family decks or these feeling decks home to her family and gave one to each of her children. And one boy, he's 9 years old, and he was kind of withdrawing from the family. He was going to his room to play a lot of games. His grades were suffering. He was really quiet and withdrawn. And Mom tried everything with him, everything. And then what ended up happening is she brought these feeling cards home, didn't say much about it, and the next morning the 9-year-old boy came to her and said, Mom, I finally get it. And she said, what? What do you get? He said, this is how I'm feeling. And he gave her the card that said, misunderstood. That's huge as a parent to know that your child's feeling misunderstood. That gives you something to go on. It shows that parents and kids and everybody has different feelings and different emotions all the time, and that that's okay. Feeling cards, yep.
Sarah, sorry, it's Megan here. Just had a comment come through that I wanted to share. Maybe you could speak to it. This person has written, I've been using this in the office and find that it often invites complaining or a big conversation that sometimes we don't have time for. How would you answer or respond to that comment?
Yep. Fabulous. Okay, so I respond to it this way. Part of the workplace culture of these cards or the number system or those different kinds of system is understanding and working together as a team to say, okay, what are we going to do with that? I think a number is a lot easier and should be a lot less distracting than, you know, complaining about work. If I just leave it at a 3, it gives people permission to say, you know what, I'm not having such a great day. I need some space, or that's why my door is closed. If it's bringing up lots of chance to complain, if a person is like bickering and saying that they're stressed out all the time and overworked and overwhelmed, that's a time for a discussion, a conversation between you two, because really as a leader then in that case, we're going to encourage, okay, how do we make work a better place and a better fit for you? How do we work together to make that happen? And in our trainings, that's exactly what we cover. How do you bring your best to work? And when you are feeling distracted, how do you know, what tools you're going to use to overcome that so that, you know, maybe by the afternoon you're feeling happy or more content. The other thing we do on our cards is on the back of every card when you flip it, there's a little tip. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, break down your project into 5. It's a reminder, a tip, a reminder to how to deal with that emotion or that feeling that you're having. So training is a big piece of it if it is for a workplace, and the other piece to it is really having a one-to-one conversation if you're a leader or a coworker with that individual that seems to be bringing down the team with the negativity or just using them as an excuse to complain. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it was just this person mentioned it was related to the number system that they've tried. And it it has opened up bigger conversations than maybe anticipated potentially, but I think you answered it well.
Okay, I'm going to leave it with this then, just because not everyone's in a workplace situation. If that is the case, I would say call up Stressed Out Solutions, and if we are part of your team, let's talk as a resource consultant or a corporate consultant to say what's going on, what's the bigger picture here, why is this the type of negative response you're getting to this, because there's probably a bigger conversation that needs to happen, and we're happy to work that through with you and have that conversation. All right, so those are kinds of things that we can do to create some conversation. Next one is chaos to calm. So remember that example I gave you where your mind just starts spinning and spinning and spinning, and one thing becomes a dozen things. How do you calm that down? How do you help get back to the point? So this is a great tool. Say you say, I hate work, or your child says, I hate school. Well, it's not everything about work or school. It is not. If it is everything about work, then maybe it's not a good fit for you. But that's a whole different story. But it's not everything about school or work. If you broke that down, actually went on a whiteboard or a flip chart and said, okay, so what is it about work or what is it about school that you don't like? Well, I like gym class, but I really don't like math class. Okay, so take math class. Is it everything about math class? No, when we do those fun word games, they're pretty fun. They're pretty good. I like Mr. Jones. Oh, that's good. And then break it down even further. Oh, one thing I don't like about math class is Johnny who sits next to me. Oh, why is that? And just breaking it down and dissolving the chaos that comes from that, you might find there's one real stressor. And that one real stressor, we can often say, is there something we can do about that? Is there something we can do about that? And usually the answer is yes. So looking at what is creating this chaos is usually your mind spinning, and as soon as you write something out and start breaking it down, you can release all the other parts that are not the chaos, that are not the stressor, and find this one key piece that you want to work on, and that's going to help you take the chaos out. It sounds like a big process, but even today, because I've used this tool for years, even today when I get into a tailspin, I can do it in my mind without writing it down. Like it can become second nature. Wait a minute, what am I really stressed about here? For me in business, one of the things, as you can imagine, is when, let's say we're trying to, get a contract with a company, and somebody brings some really challenging questions to the table, and my head spins. Oh, I'm not going to get the contract. I don't have a good service. And my head just goes and goes and goes into some really negative places. I can now stop myself, put the red sign up and say, okay, break this down. What am I really concerned about? What is the real stressor here? The stressor is that this piece of it, maybe I need to work on a little bit to really make it clear for the client. So it's breaking it down so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming, and there are solutions for most problems that come up that you can ask yourself, what am I going to do about this? All right, chaos to calm. Our next one is how to create a support circle. So if you had been with me last September, Megan's going to laugh at this story, but if you had been with me last September, you would have seen me attempt to do my first triathlon. So the tri, it means it's a shorter course for us beginners like me. And I was standing there and I was getting ready for this triathlon, and the swim is the first part. So I'm in the water, ready for the swim. I got the swim. I get it. I love swimming. And I wasn't prepared for all the feet in my face and the splashing and the people pulling you under, but it was going to be great. So I get through the swim and I get off to the bike, and I hadn't been on a bike in 20 years. But I got on a bike and with the proper training, and I go out there and I had a great bike ride. And then I come back to do this run. It was just a 2.5K run, and I'm there and I'm at my last 400 meters. And now you've got to picture me running. I can see the finish line, 400 meters, and I'm somewhat running. And behind me is Garth, my business partner, and he is Megan's partner in life, and he's behind me and he's yelling, he's going, Sarah, just go, you guys, it's only 400 meters, get your feet moving. And I'm sitting there going, okay, okay, okay. Now the funny thing is that Garth is actually walking at the pace I'm running. So you can tell I'm suffering a little bit, very slow. My friend Nancy, she comes beside me and she says, she runs the last 400 meters with me, and she says, Sarah, you've got this. This is so fun to do this with you. I can't wait to do the next one with you. And we just ran together, and it was like just comfortable. And then you see my coach, and she's at the finish line, and she's talking about things like keep your posture and keep your cadence and just breathe through it, breathe through it. She's giving me all the coaching techniques I needed. And then there was my husband, and he was behind the video camera, and I didn't know until later because he's very quiet and would never, you know, say anything above, you know, like a level of 2. He's very, very quiet. And he was sitting there behind the video camera, and he was saying, Sarah, I love you, and I'm so proud of you, and you've got this, and you make our whole family proud. So all of this different types of support is what helped get me to the finish line. And the reason I share this with you is because often we don't look at who is in our support circle, because an EAP program may not be enough. That one friend that you call up for everything may not be enough. So what I suggest you do is take a look at this circle, put you in the middle, and put all the people in your life around you, the people that you call your support circle. And then you can ask yourself a couple of questions. Do I go to the same person every time I need for support? Because maybe you're overwhelming or draining or tiring that individual. Do I receive the type of support I need from that individual? I run a business. My husband Mike is a mechanic for trucks. And I can come home and I can say, oh, I had a really stressful day in the business. This and this and this happened. And my husband, God love him, he will hug me and he'll say, oh, Sarah, he says, oh, I'm so proud of you. It's going to be okay. But it doesn't really help me with my problem or my challenge. So I need to go to somebody else in my circle, maybe my business partner, maybe you know, a good business coach that I have, Lori, or, you know, different things in my life that will help me with that particular challenge. So look at who you go to for different stressors that you have. What kind of support can they give you? And then, do I need to build my support circle to help deal with a challenge that's going on, such as past abuse, parenting, depression, something that maybe only a professional or a coach or a counselor or somebody in that kind of world, they should be in your support circle too. So as I mentioned, I have a business coach and they help me with the business needs. And so who is in your circle? How are you using those people in your circle? And where might there be a gap of you're not getting the support you need from a particular situation you're going through? Create a support circle. And then this exercise is based on all of those things, and it kind of wraps all of this up in the last few minutes that we have together. Think of anxiety. This is an activity that I do with all ages that I've been in contact with. We did actually a big project in our dance studio with it. And what it is you build a collage around anxiety, because anxiety for kids this day is on the rise. We know, we hear about it, we see it often. You take a collage and all do it as a family. Everybody does a collage of all the things that scare them or make them uncomfortable or that they fear. So on my collage here, I'm worried about, you know, climate change. I'm worried about, or I get nervous with technology these days. I'm concerned about my friends that are wearing masks and not living their authentic life. The whole idea of communication through the phone, you know, makes me uncomfortable. And then the busyness, where this world is going, and we've seen aspects of that in the last couple of evenings, very sadly, and how that's playing on what we do every day and how we do it. So you do a collage like this of all the things, and your children do it. Everybody does one, and you do it with glue and all that good stuff, depending on the type of family that you are. And then if you go to the next slide, then you do a collage of all the things that make you feel confident and empowered and make you feel safe and trusted. So I've got my kids on here, my positive outlook on things. I journal a lot. Journaling is very important in the world of mental health. I have my network of people that help me through the business. Dance and music is a big part of our family's life, and the water. So, and one of our clients is on there too. So we've got this collage of all the things that make me wake up every morning and do what I do. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the collage of all the things that you fear, and as a family you rip that up into a million pieces, and you just say, I'm in control. I'm in control. And then you take the other collage and you put it on your wall and you take a picture of it and you give that picture, not just on your phone, you actually print that picture and you give it to your little boy or girl, or to keep it yourself, and you put it in their backpacks or you put it in your lunch bags, and you just always have it on you so that your child or you or whoever it is feels safe. And it works great for seniors in a senior home too. Do a collage for them, things that they can look at when they get anxious or nervous. It's a great tool. It works really well with anxiety, and just wanted to share that with you because, for kids, I'd say this is one of the most successful tools I've seen out there as far as building a bridge. Parents even have anxieties as well and fears, but there's always a counterbalance to that we do have things and people in our life that make us feel safe even when the world seems unsafe. All right, next one. Finding the right resources for the right individual. So again, this goes for all age groups. Remember that what works with one person does not necessarily work for another. Look at what is going to be most helpful for you so that you can get the support you need. And if you can't figure that out on your own, then you know what? It's okay. Ask questions, ask friends, call up your local Canadian Mental Health Association, start the conversation. It takes a team. So build your supports and make sure you have a team of supports. Important thing here is don't wait until crisis. The best time to help people is actually when they're well, because then they're more open and receptive to getting help. Ask questions, lots of questions, and finally reach out. Reach out to someone if you walk away from here today and think, something touched home for me, or I want to do some promoting of mental health in my family, or want to be preventative because I am worried about my teenager. So start those conversations. And if we go to the last slide, and then we can ask some questions. Look at this, right on time. I love this because you have things to do and kids to put to bed. If you have questions you are left with or think of after today, email and call us. We're available, and I've got the information up there. If you like something you've heard today, share it with someone else. So this is going to be recorded, and you're more than welcome to share it with somebody that you think may need this information. If you need support, ask for it. Ask for it. You are not alone, and the only way to end stigma and silence is to speak out, share, and support. The other thing I'd encourage is to sign up today for SOS, Facebook, Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, be a part of the mental health conversation. We put up tips up there. We kind of filter through the many media channels of what's going on in the world of mental health, and we will post things that are relevant to some of the topics that we've just talked about. So keep that communication alive. So for ending here today, if you do have to leave because it's 8 o'clock, I totally appreciate that. Please feel free to reach out through email. If you've heard something that you want to build into your workplace, we definitely are doing more and more work with workplaces and companies of all sizes. And on the other note, if you can stay for a few minutes and you have questions you want to ask now, I'm happy to stay on the call for a few minutes while we do that.
Thanks, Sarah. That was excellent. So I'd encourage anybody on the call that has a question to simply jot it in. There was a comment, Sarah, about the mood cards and some, just read it here, sorry. This person says, I like the idea of the feeling cards because people don't always know the proper descriptions for how they feel, which is so true. You mentioned that. It's hard to, specifically for kids, I think for anybody, to put kind of how they're feeling in words. And if it's frustrating because people can't get it out, then these cards certainly do provide some sort of outlet. And I think they're going to become available, are they not?
Yes, so they will be on our website soon, and you can actually purchase them through them. But if you want a set of them or a deck of them, like many decks for a company or for a family or things like that, just email me and we'll make sure to get those to you. The other thing about the feeling decks that are really great is that it can also show the change within a day, because one moment you could be feeling really frustrated, but then, an hour later you feel content. And it's good for people to see those differences, that people go through emotions every day throughout the day.
That's great. So a question did come in. I'm just going to paraphrase it here. elementary school child at school has a friend in the classroom that is obviously not well, speaks out, tantrums, classes have to be evacuated, etc. And there was a question here about how do you talk to your child if they're coming home, replaying the day, not too sure all of what goes on in the classroom, but do you have any ideas on how having a conversation with an elementary aged child on the actions of others may be faced?
Mm-hmm. So I would suggest talk about a time when you know your child's been frustrated or upset or crying or worried, and then write down or even draw it out to say, imagine if that was 10 times that. So you get out your crayons and you say, okay, this is how you felt. So let's say this one thing, like a popsicle stick, but some children in that same circumstance might feel 10 of these. And how do you think they would act if they felt 10 times what you were feeling? That would be pretty tough. And so how do I take care of myself while this is going on in class? Well, I bring out my collage, my picture to remind me that we're safe and we're going to be okay and the teachers are going to take care of him and I'm here for me. Or open up that conversation on a scale of 1 to 10, looking at these tools. On a scale of 1 to 10, how was it today? It was only a 2. Did that have any reflection on what went on in the class today? Well, no, Mom, it didn't, right? So use some of the tools that we've just talked about to help understand that other people have different reactions to things and their intensity of that feeling or emotion or illness might look differently. The other way we can look at it too, is give it a real life example. So remember when Johnny had a cast on his arm? And that, like he still played ball and he came out and he did things. Well, remember when your little friend was in the hospital with tonsillitis and they looked really pale and they had to be in the hospital for a couple of days and they didn't come to school and they couldn't play ball? Everybody's illnesses, their symptoms are different. And so for this guy, those are what he's going through. And for you, this is what you're going through. And that's one way to explain it, I guess, is keep it as neutral.
Thanks, Sarah. Are there any other questions or comments from anybody still left on the call? Just checking here. Okay, so we don't have any more questions coming through. So I'd love to take this opportunity to thank everybody for being on the call tonight. Lots of really great tools shared, and Sarah, thank you so much for all you do and all the wonderful strategies and takeaways that you provided us tonight. And as Sarah mentioned, I have been recording this, so it will be sent out to everybody that attended tonight on the call, and I'll be sending that out in a link form, so you're more than welcome to go through that link and share that link, provided someone that you know could use some information about addressing mental health in their families. So thank you so much for all of your great questions, great conversations, comments, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for participating tonight. And thanks, Sarah. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.